It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Montana State Billings head softball coach, Coach Lisa McKinney. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start coaching in college softball?
So coaching kind of fell upon me. I was actually in school. I actually started out as an engineer, and then I realized that calculating G forces wasn't really my thing. I wanted to design roller coasters, and I switched into exercise sports science and was actually going to go towards like a retail background. And My coach that I had for high school and summer ball was working at Linfield College. It's Division III out in Oregon. They were looking for an assistant, and he mentioned my name, and I had an uncle that was working there as well. So I moved to McMinnville and started the coaching career and never looked back.
What was that like going to Oregon State to play collegiate softball?
It was really exciting. It was my choice for a long time. I went when I was a little girl. I remember watching Tara Beister pitch, and she threw this knuckleball. And I don't know what it was about that, but that just made me decide, like, this is where I'm going. And so from that point on, I'd always want to be a Vive, and was glad that it got to come true.
What was that like, obviously getting to become a Beaver and getting to put on that softball jersey for them?
It meant a lot to me. I worked hard. I was a walk-on originally, and had to earn my spot and fought hard for it. And I was, proud to stay in Oregon and represent the state. And so it was pretty exciting to get to stay there and live out my dream.
Of course, as a player, what was that like getting to play in that rivalry game against the Oregon Ducks?
To me, the Oregon game was like even bigger, I think, just because the pitcher that had gone to Oregon, I faced her in state in high school. And so we kind of had like a little rivalry before we even went off to college. So it was pretty exciting to see her again there. And, it's always big in Oregon between Oregon State and the University of Oregon. You can always see flags on the road when it's, Civil War time. And obviously the softball game's not as big as the football game, but it was always exciting to go, just 45 minutes from home and play another team.
While at Oregon State, what was it like going to the College World Series in 2008?
Yeah, so we actually went in 2006, my senior year, but it was amazing. We'd been working a long time to get to that point. The previous years we had made it to like the championship game in regionals, and then my senior year we won regionals, got to host super regionals, and we had to face another Pac-10 team, and then made it onto the World Series and faced two more Pac-10 teams at the World Series. So it was like we were just back in conference games, but there's no feeling like being at the College World Series.
As a player, what were some of your favorite memories competing in the College World Series?
I think just spending that time, with my teammates, knowing all the like hard work we'd put in to get to that point. And, obviously in my time, I was pretty fortunate to be a part of the first Oregon State female team to win Pac-10 championship, and also to be the first team to make it to the World Series. So I was really fortunate in that. And I think we all knew that was what we were capable of. And so it's just kind of like a surreal moment getting to that point and just being on that stage.
After your college time, what was it like getting to play professionally and going to play in the NPF?
That was something that I like hadn't really even thought of during my time in college. That was the NPF was kind of new back then. It was still kind of finding its footing. It was pretty exciting just because you got drafted, and at that point in time, there wasn't really anything for softball players to get drafted. So it was a little bit of a feeling like going into the MLB. So I remember like sitting in class that day knowing that the draft was coming out, and Kirk had told me that there was a potential that I might be going into the pro league. And so I just remember waiting to see the draft. And I think when it came out, my mom had texted me, and like I was trying to hold my excitement in class because it's a pretty exciting moment. And I'd never thought that I would, get that opportunity.
What were some of your favorite memories competing professionally in the NPF and overseas?
In the NPF, I would definitely say it was the connections I got to make with my teammates. It was different. There was another pro league going on at the same time where they kind of got players together in that area and then played games, and the team switched every week. But in the NPF, you actually like moved to the city that you were drafted by, and you like lived with your teammates, and you guys traveled everywhere. So it was almost like college, but on a different level. And it was definitely, you could feel that it was not only about being competitive, but also about entertaining the fans. Because I remember like throwing beads into the stands and just yelling crazy things with my teammates to keep the fans going wild in between innings. And then going over to Austria, the next year, and getting to play over there was a completely different experience. I mean, I had teammates from the age of 13 to 32 on my team. And so it was just a lot of different levels of, their playing abilities. And so some of those younger gals that were, in their teens and early 20s, they were expecting the Americans to help them, like teach them, to help get them better. And then obviously the other girls, we were just competing and pushing with them every day. And I was fortunate enough to get to share that experience with Brianne McGowan, now Brianne Durfee. She was the pitcher at Oregon State while I was there as well. And so we got to have a lot of fun over in Austria during that time.
After your professional career ended, what was it like getting into college coaching and going to Learfield?
So Linfield, that would have been in between my time with the NPF and Austria. It was just really getting my foot in the door. It was like your typical first coaching job where you're grinding. I think I made like $3,000. Huge thanks to my uncle for letting me live in his house during that time. It saved a lot. And, I learned a lot from Jackson over at Linfield. And obviously I'd been with Greg Herman for a long time, with him being my high school coach and my summer ball coach. So it was kind of, fun to work with him on a different level. But mostly that job, I was just, showing up to practice and trying to help bring some of the stuff that we did at Oregon State to a Division III program. And those girls really latched on. It was, Division III is different because they don't have athletic scholarships. Like, those girls are there because they want to be there. And I was really fortunate to work with that group because they all wanted to be there, and I could see how much they wanted to improve. And so I had a great time. I was the infield coach and catching coach, and worked with the hitters too. And I mean, not very many people get to say in their first year of coaching that they won a national championship. I got lucky to jump on a team that had gone to the D3 World Series the year before, and they got a taste of it, and they were hungry for it, and they wanted to get back, and they sure did. I'll say one thing about that team: if you beat us once, you weren't going to beat us twice. That was for sure.
Of course, what was that experience like as a coach going to the tournament and getting to compete as a coach in the tournament?
It was definitely a different feeling. It was kind of nice because I had just gone, with Oregon State the year before. So I felt like I could really relate with the girls and what they were feeling. Most of those girls, like I said, had been there the previous year. They just hadn't won it. So it was taking it to that next level. And even while we were there, we had a loss in the middle of it. And, we had a conversation as a team about what kind of offense we were and how strong we were as a defense. And just, we were fortunate enough that we had like 3 of the top hitters in the country in our lineup. So reminding each other of that you have that is important, because sometimes you let the stage get too big, right? And you forget that you're just playing softball with your teammates. And so that was something different. And I thought that was something that I could help bring to the team at that point, to remind them, like, you guys are this good. You got yourselves here.
What was your experience like getting to come to Middle Tennessee State to become the assistant coach?
So that was kind of a crazy process. I actually got contacted by Jody Shimoleski. She was also an Oregon State alum, and she was at Middle Tennessee State as a pitching coach, and they were looking for a catching specialist. And I hadn't really thought about getting my master's degree, and they offered me a spot to be the graduate assistant, basically, and really work with the catchers and the hitters. And I was excited. I remember having to have like my first real adult conversation with Jackson at Linfield and tell him that a Division I had contacted me, and I think I wanted to, explore that route and see what it was like. And it's always hard to leave a team and those girls that you've spent so much time with, but Jackson was really understanding at Linfield and encouraged me to go on to Middle Tennessee. And then that's kind of when things got crazy. I went to Austria that summer, and the head coach that was there decided she wanted to spend more time with her family. And so they actually had a coaching change while I was in Austria, and hired a new coach. And fortunate for me, she was, willing to keep me on. And I kind of became like the pitching coach, which I hadn't really expected. I've spent a lot of times with pitchers, obviously, in bullpens, but I surely never taught one. So that was different. I've spent a lot of time in the bullpen with Bree and Ty, and Amy and Dina and all my teammates at Oregon State. And so trying to apply what I've learned from them through high school, going to, pitching lessons and putting that into workouts, was a very different experience from Linfield for me, and at Middle Tennessee, I was like actually in the office and learning, what some of the paperwork you have to do. What are all the rules of Division I softball, because the compliance book is like this thick and you got to know every rule. And so that was a real learning experience for me. And, going back to college and getting my, starting my master's degree there. So it was definitely a different experience from Linfield, but I'm really thankful for it.
While at Middle Tennessee State, what were some of your biggest accomplishments as a coach?
I think, really it was just me learning that I could handle the pitchers and work with the pitching staff. I think other things that I learned too were just, since I was such a young coach, I learned a lot of like what not to do too. And I think that's important through coaching is, sometimes you don't always learn what to do, and it's almost beneficial to learn what not to do. And I learned a lot of that at Middle Tennessee, and I learned how to, have that relationship between the players, because I was in a different role from Linfield. So I learned a lot there.
Coming to Montana State, what was that like first starting off as the assistant coach before getting your opportunity to become the next head coach?
Yeah, so the MSUB job was actually really interesting how I came amongst it. So when I played over in Austria, played with a gal named Steph Goslin, and she was actually at MSUB. And so, obviously we had created a friendship during that time over in Austria playing pro ball. And when we got back, she had wrote me and said, hey, like my school's looking for an assistant coach. I really think you should apply. And so I applied, and I remember doing the interview in like June, and I didn't hear back until like August. Like it was a long time. So it was a really long waiting game. And I remember I had decided to part ways with Middle Tennessee State, and my mom and I drove through Billings just to check it out and see what it was, and like the feel of the town and whatnot. And so it's kind of cool to see that. And then when I got that call in August, I was, pretty excited to move and get going with another team and see how that was. I never in my life did I think I would live in Tennessee nor Montana.
Of course, what were some of your accomplishments as an assistant coach for Montana?
So I kind of kept the role of being the pitching coach when I came to MSUB, worked a lot with the pitchers. I think we did, pretty well during that time. Obviously, my first year, again, I got lucky. I think my time from like 2006 to 2009, I was just really lucky, going to the D1 World Series, winning the D3 National Championship, winning the NPF Championship, competing in the European Cup. I had so many great things. And then, my first year in 2009 here at MSUB, we win the GNAC and get to go postseason. So that was pretty exciting. We had a really big group of seniors that were great leaders that year and really carried the team. And we also had a whole bunch of freshmen that really helped out as well. So it was exciting to see that in year one, what we could do.
While as an assistant, what was that like? Obviously, balancing being a college assistant coach and also a professional athlete.
At that time I had kind of decided I wasn't really going to go back to professional ball after playing in Austria. I think, being a catcher, all those years of catching, it really starts to wear on you. And so I think before that I had kind of decided I probably wasn't going to go back. I still had fun with the girls. I still do to this day. I still hit like live defense, and sometimes I hit lefty off the pitchers, and I am not a lefty hitter, but I still have fun with the girls. And when we're working defense, I'm like slapping off of our pitchers trying to go, and I still stay competitive that way. But I wouldn't say that I was like actively working to make myself better as a player to go back in pro ball. I was more pushing myself as a coach to make the players better, because I figured if I could be competitive at practice, I was going to make them more competitive, and they have a lot of fun when they beat me. So it's always a good time.
Of course, in 2012, what was that season like? Obviously, going to the NCAA tournament and being from obviously that team has only gone since 09.
So back then we were on this like weird roller coaster where we would win the GNAX and then the next year would be really hard. And I think a lot of that was due to like we would lose a really big class. I mean, we lost seven or eight seniors from that 2009 class, so we became, those next girls needed to step up. And so just finding that wave, and we were just on a roller coaster. And, we almost made it in 2011. We made a good run at it. And then in 2012, they put it all together, and those freshmen from 2009 were seniors in 2012. And I think they were just determined to get back. They had that taste when they were freshmen, and they wanted to get back to the postseason. And so it was a really fun season working with the girls and like seeing how they competed and who we went after. And it was just a great time to get back to the NCAA tournament.
In 2019, what was that feeling like when you got announced to become the next head coach for Montana State?
Yeah, so in 2019, I actually came back. So I'm kind of a crazy story. So the head coach actually resigned in 2011 in the middle of season. So I got thrown into head coaching in the middle of season. We were literally 6-11. The head coach resigns, and the AD comes and talks to me and is like, "Hey, how do you feel about being a head coach?" And I go, "Listen, I'm going to be really honest." I go, "I know softball. I know the X's and O's. I know how to play. I know how to coach softball." But I go, when it comes to the admin part, I'm like, I'm going to need some help. Like, I'm going to need some help through all this admin paperwork, making offers to kids. And, at that time it was Dr. Gary Gray here at MSUB, and he did a great job of, kind of leading me through that and explaining everything. And our current compliance director was actually my assistant back then. And her and I went to like every meeting together and learned as much as we could together as, a new head and assistant in the middle of a season. And, a huge shout out to that team, because they really got behind us, and like we really turned it around. Like I said, we were 6-11 at that point, and I think in Division II they rank the top 8, and only the top 8 go to the regionals out of the West, out of every region. But I think we ended up being like number 9 or 10 after being 6-11 in the middle of season. So I think that showed a lot of what that team was capable of. So I became the head coach in 2012 after that, and took the team back to the NCAA tournament in 2015. And at that point I'd kind of felt like I've taken this team as far as I'm going to take it. Like, so let's see what someone else can do, and I'm going to go like test my skills at another school. And so I actually went to San Francisco State for 2 years and was the head coach there. And then I went to University of Nevada, Reno for 2 years, and went back into the assistant role, which I think was good, to get behind another head coach and see, how they do it. Because I was a young head coach. I was 27, back in 2012 when I got named the head coach here. And after some time in Nevada, my husband and I were still in the newlywed phase, and we weren't really seeing each other much. And I was like, this just isn't the life that I want for us. I don't want to see you 1 hour a day, And so MSUB opened back up, and we talked about it, and wanted to come back. His dad still lives here over in Bozeman, and so we talked about it and decided, yeah, let's apply. Let's see if I can get it, and was glad to come back, in 2019 and back to, a place you knew. It was so weird coming back because like the people on campus remembered me, but obviously like some people had been replaced and they're like, oh yeah, just go talk to Bill. And I'm like, who's Bill? I haven't been here for 4 years. Like, who is this person? So it was kind of surreal being in a place that you knew but didn't fully know. So it was exciting to come back in 2019.
Of course, what was that feeling like coming back in 2019 after obviously going there in 2012 as a head coach?
It was, like I said, it was kind of surreal just being back and, knowing but not knowing. Just because I said, like, a lot of pieces move, and I'm sure, you've learned through your time speaking to athletics, like, people move, people go on, that's just part of athletics. And so getting to know all the new coaches and, all the new people on campus and remaking those connections was, just my first thing to really do back in 2019 when I came back after leaving for 4 years.
How has it been like obviously knowing that you're the winningest coach at Montana State?
I think it's pretty exciting. I didn't even know that until they wrote it in the release when I came back, which is pretty cool. Obviously I've been here for a long time. I think this is like my 11th year total, and then I guess this would be my 7th or 8th year as the head coach here. So it's fun to be a part of, and I've kind of, even from a young age, like I said, I was a walk-on at Oregon State. I've always kind of prided myself in like being the person that's like, go ahead and doubt us. It's okay. Because everyone's like, oh, you're from Montana. Like, it snows there. Like, you guys don't get to be outside. But I kind of like being the underdog and like proving people wrong. So what better place to do that in a place that it snows? I mean, we got like 3 inches of snow out there right now, and more's coming.
While as a head coach, what are some of your biggest accomplishments for Montana?
I think accomplishment wise, it's going to the postseason, but I think the thing that I try to pride myself in the most is just teaching these girls how to be like independent and strong women. Obviously I want them to be the best softball players they can be, but I want them to like go out in the real world and feel comfortable in their own skin, right? Like, when you go get that first job, it's difficult, and they need to be prepared when they leave this team too. It's hard when you're an athlete and you've had built-in friendships your whole life, right? We get to go to a school and meet with the team, and we already have, in softball, we have 20 people that already have a similarity to us, and it's easy to make friends. But when you go out to the real world and get that first job, you might not have that. Like, yeah, you guys work at the same company, but you might not have any other commonalities. And so really teaching them how to communicate with people and be independent of themselves. I think that's my biggest thing. And, we're really lucky that we have a lot of alumni in town. I think that's something that's really unique to us, as well as, we've had a lot of Nevada kids come through MSUB, and a lot of them are still here. And I think that says a lot about Billings and the school and what kind of experience they had, that the fact that after college, they're like, I don't want to leave Billings. I want to stay here. So I think that says a lot. And I think that's unique to our players too, that they have the opportunity to talk to so many alumni in town. And occasionally we have alumni just pop up at practice and they're like, hey, I want to see what's going on today. Like, can I hit 2 afterwards?
Can you talk about, of course, the culture that you've built as a head coach for Montana?
I think that goes kind of back to what we were just talking about, right? Like, we're really trying to create that family culture. We're really big on like team bonding and understanding your teammate and appreciating them for who they are, right? Just there's so many different people out there, and we've all got to learn how to like love each other. And sometimes you got to agree to disagree, and that's okay. And so I think we talk a lot about that, and we read a book every year. This year we read Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It was very raw and very real. I highly recommend it for any team that's, really struggling with like confidence or trying to find Find a way have how to deal with adversity. It was a great book. It has challenges built into it. And honestly, like, I think it brought our team closer together like that. Challenge 1 was really hard. You had to open yourself up immediately to your teammates. And so we do a lot of things like that. And we have a lot of competitions. Like, we do competition week right after Thanksgiving to have the girls, that's kind of the lull period, right? Like, they've already played their fall games. We're waiting to play until February. So we do this competition week where, like, the whole week's competition, like lifting's a competition, running's a competition, softball's a competition. So it's a lot of fun. So I think we create a lot of that, of just like family and a good competitive nature, and learning how to, pump up the people that are in the same position as you, because you've got to do that in the real world too.
What does a typical game day look like as a head coach versus obviously as a player?
Oh man. So as a head coach, there's a lot more planning. And I think it even looks different from like a head coach to an assistant coach too. I remember the things I thought about as an assistant coach on game day were totally different than the things I thought about on game day as a head coach. When you're a head coach, you're thinking like, is the field playable? Is the flag up? Like, are people where they're supposed to be? Do we have announcers? Who's doing the bat testing? You have all these things. And I feel like as an assistant coach, you've got that little bit more of a relationship with the players. The players. So my assistants do a great job of talking to me of like, what did they see in the players today? How did they warm up? Does everyone look like they're in a good headspace for today? So they do a lot of that, while I'm thinking more of like logistics. I mean, obviously the lineup's important and who we're going with, but I think initially a lot of the logistics are running through my head. And then I rely heavily on the assistants to talk to me about the team and what they're seeing. And then as a player, I just showed up, and whoever we were playing. Like, there's another team in the other dugout. Great. Throw me the ball. I'm going to hit it. Kept it simple.
Who are some of the teams that you face each week in your conference?
So in our conference, we play teams in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Canada. We actually have the only NCAA Canadian team in our conference, which is Simon Fraser. They're up in Burnaby. We play Western Washington, which is in Bellingham, St. Martin's, which is in Lacey, Washington, Western Oregon, down in Monmouth. So it's always nice to go close to home down there. And then Central Washington is over in Ellensburg, and then Northwest Nazarene and Nampa, Idaho are all the teams in our conference. We're pretty small softball wise.
Of course, what is that like, obviously getting to play those teams in Oregon and Washington, and then getting to go all the way to Canada to play in Canada?
So, I mean, going back to Oregon is always great. I get to see some friends, occasionally some of my friends from high school, or even actually some of the girls from Linfield will pop up and come say hi, because they're still out there in Oregon. We do have a few alumni out in Oregon too, so sometimes they pop up. Going to Washington, we have a ton of alumni in Washington. There's a huge group of them out there. I was sad I actually just missed them. A whole bunch of them came back. We've been fortunate to have Meg Harrison-Chuck, who's an alum here. She just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and a whole bunch of those Seattle girls came back, and I missed them because we were down in California. So it is sad to miss them, but I heard that they're trying to come out to one of our games out in Washington, which is cool. And Canada is always fun because, it's like a different country, and the girls get to experience something different. And we try to do that too. On the D2 level, it's life and the balance, and we try to give the girls some of that. When we have some free time, we go experience new things.
What does the recruitment process look like for those prospective student athletes looking to play college softball?
I think they're all a little different, from person to person and team to team, but usually it, starts with an email to a coach telling them that you're interested in their school and you'd like to have them come out to a game, and hopefully you attach a video to that. I know that we obviously have to do a lot of that because there's not a lot of softball tournaments around here, so we rely heavily on video on who we want to go watch. And I think some other coaches probably do that too. Just, do you think you're going to fit the program and things like that? So emails really started out, and then usually if you like the kid, you find a way to go see them in action somewhere. And see how they are in a game, because most videos are highlight reels, and it's like, wow, this girl only hits doubles and home runs, she's awesome. But that's not the reality of it, right? Like we want to go see them in a game and how do they handle adversity? What are they doing if they strike out or make an error? And so that's kind of that. And then after that, we just, when the NCAA allows us to talk to them, we start that communication and start, learning who they are as a person, talk to their coaches, find out how they are as a teammate, things like that. And just go through that. And if it's someone we really want to go after, we bring them out on an official visit and offer them if they fit in with the team well.
Of course, as a head coach, when going out on the road, what are some of the things that you look at in those prospective student athletes?
So number one, always looking for someone that's just athletic, right? They gotta be able to play ball. And once we know they can play ball, we're looking at grades. We try to look for 3.5 and above. We have gone for some girls that are a little bit lower than that, but academics are really important just because we're not here to babysit you, right? Like we're here to help you become a better softball player and hopefully, like I said, make you a stronger, independent woman by the time you leave here. And so we really look for good grades so the girls aren't getting into academic trouble while they're here. So I'd say that's number two. And then number three is probably just, how are you dealing with adversity and how much are you talking to mom and dad between the game and, like the little things, like what are you doing? Are you, independent or are you relying on others during the game and whatnot?
Of course, during the official visit, what does that look like for those prospective student athletes coming to Billings?
So on a typical visit here, when they get into town, it just kind of depends, but I'll just give you like our 1 day, everything kind of in a day look at an official visit. They'll usually start the day off with weights. So go watch the girls at weights and see what that looks like and meet our strength and conditioning coach. After that, they'll go to breakfast with some of the girls that live in the dorms. And then usually they'll head off to class usually after that. And once they're done with class, we'll send them on a campus tour, which I'd like to shout out like the other side of campus for campus tours. They do a fantastic job of giving information to those kids. And it takes a lot off our shoulders for information. So they do a great job on our campus tours here. After the campus tour, they'll usually like come in the coach's office and we'll kind of give them our, spiel of like, this is our program. This is what we do. These are the things you can expect if you were to come here type stuff. And then after that, we'll actually go get one of our uniforms and they get to go take pictures, which I think is like every kid's favorite thing nowadays is to go take those pictures and like show off jerseys and stuff when they go on visits. So they get to go take pictures in the studio where all the lighting's the best lighting you've ever had in your life. And everything looks good. So they have a good time there. And then they get to go to lunch and then they come to practice, the Division II. We actually get to have tryouts so they can actually go and practice. I know at Division I they can't do that. So we're fortunate that we get to kind of mix them in at practice as long as they're not in their softball season. And then after that, we usually go to dinner with the family and then they head out. So that's kind of like a fast day. Sometimes it's divided up in 2 days, depending on their flights. But whether it's a 2-day trip or a 1-day trip, they're going to get all of that in that time.
As a head coach, what is it like obviously seeing those freshmen get to put on that uniform for the first time?
It's special, right? Like you've put a lot of time into those kids, through the recruiting process, especially nowadays. I mean, most of the time we're talking to those kids when they're juniors in high school. And so you've been building this relationship for 2 years. You get them on campus. You're excited to see, what they can do here. It's really, starting back at the bottom of the totem pole. A lot of kids are, number one on their high school team, but then you got to come to college and restart that process. And it's exciting to see like who's going to step up and, see who's going to be that star from a young age and figure that out. So getting to see them put that uniform on for the first time, it means a lot because you've spent so much time with them and you've watched them grow over this time from when you first started talking to them through their senior season. And now they're on campus and they're playing for you. It's pretty special.
Was it like obviously seeing them put on for the last time as a senior and go on to play professional softball after that?
Yeah, that's a different feeling. I mean, watching your seniors play their last game, that's just even more of growth, right? Like we are so fortunate to watch these women grow in the 4 or 5 years, or with COVID, some of them got 6, that they're maturing and becoming adults. And a lot of people don't get to see that. Their parents aren't even seeing it at the rate that we're seeing it, because we see them every single day, from September to May, and they're not with their parents anymore. So we get to see a really like special part of their lives. I've had conversations with parents afterwards, and they're like, I never in a million years thought my daughter would have become the vocal leader. And I'm like, she is. Like, she talks at practice, she's leading the team, and they're like, I never would have thought that. So we really get to see this growth, and everyone's growth is different. I've seen like major growth jumps from freshman to sophomore year, and then they just keep going. And I've seen some people struggle freshman and sophomore year, and we don't see that growth until junior or even senior year, and I think that's part of the thing that we really talk about, like being unique and appreciating each other for who you are, because everyone's on a different path. So watching them put that jersey on that last time, it means a lot, because you've seen them grow, and you start thinking about like, what are they going to do in their futures? And you're just excited to see the person they become out in the real world after watching them grow into a leader in the 4 years here.
As a head coach, what is it like obviously seeing them getting to achieve those milestones and those career highs on the softball field?
I think that's like my why, right? Like, everyone says you've got to have a why, and mine is exactly that. Like, watching a player that is struggling with something, and like they just can't get it. It's just not happening. It's not because they're not trying. It's just not happening. And then that one day, like for some reason, a light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden, like, bam, clicks together. They've got it, and then they do it in a game like that. That is my why. Watching them do that in a game is probably the coolest thing ever, because you've watched that kid struggle and fail and fail and fail, and then they finally do it. And that's one of the coolest things to see, and just see the excitement on their face.
How's it like obviously seniors go on and play in the MPF or Athletes Unlimited or even professional softball like you did?
I think that would be a great opportunity. Obviously I was very fortunate in my career that I got to experience so many things. And I think that's something that's really helped me as a coach too. Just because I've been so many different positions, right? Between being the all-star in high school, to being the walk-on at Oregon State, to earning my spot at Oregon State, to being a part of a major team, to going professional, to playing overseas. I think that's influenced a lot of my coaching style throughout. And so watch these girls that get to go play in the NPF and go overseas. It's really special. I've been, pretty fortunate to send some of my like Division II players overseas and to get them to go play. And they, one of the gals at San Francisco State, like she went and lived with a family in Sweden, and the family still comes and visits her in the States to this day. So they have a really awesome connection there. And I always preach to the girls, you never know where softball is going to take you.
What are some of your future plans for the Montana State Billings softball program?
I think right now we're just continuing to build. We've had a few rough seasons. We haven't been back to the postseason since 2015. I think that's the major goal, is putting MSUB back on the map in the softball world of Division II. And so it's continuing to build the confidence, continuing to build these girls up and believing that they can do it. And, we can go out and compete with these teams. So I think we're just continuing along that path right now. I feel like we've really taken a big step in the positive direction this year with that. On our first weekend, we beat number 11 in the country, and we also beat another team that was receiving votes. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We just need to continue to push that, not get comfortable with having those wins and get complacent, and just continue to push the envelope and continue to go out and win games.
What advice would you give those high school athletes looking to enter college softball?
Just keep communicating and like keep working hard. I know, recruiting is a lot different than it was back when I was a high schooler. I mean, you couldn't even be talked to until your senior year. So it's really different. And I think a lot of kids get caught up in like, oh, I'm a junior and no one's talking to me. Then it's like I said earlier, everyone's on a different path. You don't know when you're going to peak, right? Maybe you peak your senior year, and there's some girls that peak in the 8th grade. So everyone has their own different path, and just keep pushing. There's a lot of softball teams out there for you. And even if that means going to a JUCO for a couple of years to get experience, like, go do it. If you love softball, you'll find a way, and just trust yourself and keep pushing.
What advice would you give those freshmen that are entering college softball?
The one thing we always tell our recruits and any of our freshmen is, like, year one, it's all about time management. And we talk about the 5 S's of school, studying, softball, sleep, and a social life. How do you balance those 5 S's every single day? And every day looks different, right? Because some days girls only have 1 class, and other days they got 4. So those 5 things look different every day. And I think that's the hardest thing for freshmen is figuring that out, because mom and dad aren't here anymore to tell you, no, you can't go out with your friends. You get to make all those decisions, right? And sometimes when you have a chemistry test at 8:00 the next morning, it's best to not go out with your friends the night before. So just learning how to say no, and knowing that saying no is okay, and just making sure you're taking care of your schoolwork, because guess what? You're not going to play softball if you don't have the grades. So you've got to get your schoolwork done.
What advice would you give those college softball players looking to play professionally, whether it's Athletes Unlimited, NPF, or even overseas?
You just got to do your best where you're at. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to go to the NPF. You never know who's watching, right? Obviously, someone from one of the teams saw one of my games, and back then I'm going to assume it was in person, because not very many games were on TV back then. I think only like the World Series was on back then, and maybe a couple of big games, but you just never know who's watching. And the softball world is so small that people are giving advice on kids that they've worked with or seen. So just always know that someone's watching, and do your best, and you never know what'll happen.
What advice would you give them that are looking to make the national team, whether it's US or Canada?
Obviously, that's like ultimate goal, right? That's like the peak of softball, to make the Team USA or Team Canada, and that starts at a young age. I mean, a lot of the gals that are on those teams have videos that are out of what they work on and what they do, and when you listen to what they're doing, I mean, that's from a young age. So you've got to be self-disciplined from a young age, and you've really got to practice with a purpose every single day, and push yourself and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's what those girls are really good at. Like, I think if I heard right, like Ala took 1,000 cuts a day, right? Like, that's unheard of. Like, I would have never dreamed of taking 1,000 cuts a day, but good on her. She's like the top hitter in the country, right? And for obvious reasons, she put time into it. She worked on her craft, and look who she became. So a lot of that's got to start early. It's got to take a lot of dedication, and it's working through a lot of failures and learning how to deal with that failure and move on.
What advice would you give those future college coaches looking to become coaches, whether it's assistant coaches or even one day a head coach and building their own program?
I would say to just, figure out what you really stand for as a coach. I think your morals as a coach are really important. Obviously, as an assistant and a head, it's a little bit different. I would say if you're getting into the assistant job, it's learning to be like loyal with your coach, and hopefully you work for someone that wants your opinion, right? Like, I always encourage my assistants, like, if they don't agree with something, to please voice their opinion. And we have talks, and they know that I have the ultimate decision of what's going to happen, but we usually discuss things out quite frequently, and have really good discussions about it. So as an assistant, you need to be ready to have some uncomfortable conversations if you don't agree with your head coach, and have them in an adult manner, and to just get ready for that, because the reality is you're both here to do the best for the kids that you're coaching, right? And you've got to figure out how to do that as a staff. And I would say the other important thing as a staff is, like, make sure you have common language. We have to teach kids in different ways, because everyone hears things a little bit differently, but you want to make sure that you have common language So you're not saying different things and the kids are doing different things because you're saying different things. You can use different words that mean the same thing, and making sure that you create that language before you teach the kids. And if you're going for the head job, really think about, like, what do you want your program to be about? What do you want your rules to be? What do you want to stand for? What's important to you, and how are you going to emphasize that?
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media, along with the Montana State Billings softball program at?
So all of the MSUB softball handles should be MSUB softball. I think on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And then I'm at Lisa McKinney. I'm going to be real honest. I don't post a lot on social media. I'm not quite that crafty. I do my best though. But yeah, if you could give us a follow for the MSUB softball team, we'd love that.
Thank you again, Coach Lisa McKinney, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the Montana State Billings softball program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Lisa McKinney, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.